Hello, Our Lady of Perpetual Help. It's my pleasure to share with you some of my insights in the Chronicles of Narnia and my love of the series as I encountered it both as a youth and now as an adult, sharing the things that stuck out to me that I like and love, that reveal sort of that deeper theological understanding of the series, but also just the childlike wonder, and because the story is told through or seen through the eyes of 4 children, and I just am excited to hear your experience with the books, or just if you're here and you haven't read the books, that's fine too. Just hear what other people have to share about what the joys of the series are, focusing on one book each week. This week we're focusing on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first book that C.S. Lewis wrote, and he writes a little preface to the book saying that he wrote it for his goddaughter, and that he was afraid that she might be a little too old to enjoy it once it's finished. But then once she gets older to the point where she can then enjoy it again and pick it back up, she should get back to him and let him know how she enjoyed it. I had both those experiences, both as a child and now as an adult, experienced the book in both those mediums, and I find as a child or as an adult, the story is beautiful and good, and a lot can be understood and taken from the story, both as a child and as an adult. I'll be covering some of the key moments of the book. I don't think knowing what is going to happen ruins the story at all, both as a child and as a adult. As I knew the story, I went through it several times, and it didn't take away any enjoyment knowing what's to happen at the end. These stories are from another world, and so that childlike wonder, that imagination, plays a part in how the story is perceived. And so knowing that the story is going to end well, because all good fantasy books have a story, a good ending. So just entering into the story, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then go into those points that really sort of stuck out to me, with the hopes that you'll all be able to share moments in the book that stuck out to you, that how the Lord reveals himself in all things, and good literature, good reading should have moments where we can see God working through it. And this being a little bit more explicit than most other books, I would say. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe begins with the 4 children. Lucy on the left, Susan, Aslan in the middle, Aslan not revealed until later, Peter, and then Edmund, 2 daughters of Eve and 2 sons of Adam. And in the book it's revealed that there is a prophecy of the 4 children are the way in which Narnia is to be restored. Because right now Narnia is under the control of the White Witch, who calls herself a queen. And so Lucy encounters Narnia much sooner than all the other 4. First, let me go over the 4 children, because I think their way of perceiving Narnia, perceiving the world, is an important aspect of how they encounter Narnia, how they encounter the story. So Lucy, being the youngest, has sort of a pure way of viewing the world, and so she is able to enter the wardrobe before anybody else, and also just the way in which she encounters it is wanting to be truthful, wanting to be good, wanting to take and receive openly. So we see sort of that pure nature in Lucy. Edmund, only a year older than Lucy, has been sort of beaten down, not beaten down, but just frustrated or maybe embittered by the school system, is what C.S. Lewis sort of draws out of Edmund. He's sort of has like a bully-ish mentality, sort of a bitterness that he's sort of fighting against, and he's at odds with the other three fairly regularly in the first half of the book. Susan is very practical. She encounters the world looking at things in a very, what is most practical, so safety being a piece, hunger, should, what is the most reasonable thing to go about it. And then Peter is, as the eldest, the leader, and he sort of has this desire to right wrongs, to fight against injustice, and lead his other siblings in a beautiful way. And that's just, characters in a caricature, and we get to see more in their personalities throughout several of the books. Speaking on that, we're starting with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe this week, and then we'll move back in the chronological order, starting with the Magician's Nephew, then skipping over The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Silver Chair, and then Last Battle, chronologically in the story in the world of Narnia. But the four encounter Narnia first through Lucy. And Lucy enters into the wardrobe as they're searching through the house. They're living in a house with an old professor who, because of the air raids, so presumably World War II, they were sent to this house to be protected from the war. But this old man is lovable, and they take a liking to him early on, and they're allowed to sort of do whatever they want, aside from staying out of the way of the housekeeper, Mrs. McCready. So on a rainy day, they search through the house, and Lucy encounters this wardrobe, and the wardrobe is like a big place to put coats, and so Lucy opens it up and finds a bunch of fur coats, and she loves fur, and so enters into the wardrobe. And as she keeps pushing back further, she feels pine on her face and snow under her shoes, and so she's intrigued. But she's also scared. But then she sees a light, the light of the lamppost, which is sort of a way in which they're both introduced to the land of Narnia, and then at the end of the story, how they leave. It's a way point for them, knowing that point. And sort of in between their world and Narnia, having this metal electric lamppost where there's no source of electricity, sort of amazing. But it's revealed in The Magician's Nephew how it comes to be. But it's sort of this, in this story, just that waypoint in between our world and the world of Narnia. And so Lucy enters in. She meets Tumnus the Fawn, and Tumnus is under the control of the White Witch. And so he has the intention of turning Lucy, as he finds out she's a daughter of Eve, one that's prophesized to fight against the White Witch and break her power, to take Lucy to the White Witch. But after encountering her and having tea with her, Tumnus recognizes that he was going to do something wrong, and so he turns away from that, at the risk of being captured by the White Witch, who you find out has the power to turn people to stone, and has made the world perpetually in Christmas, as you see the lamppost covered or surrounded by pine trees with snow. And it's Christmas, it's winter with never encountering Christmas, which is, the worst, because everybody loves Christmas and everybody loves, like, winter sort of anticipates, obviously, the birth of Jesus, but the world sees it in Christmas. And so that encounter, she wants to bring it to her siblings, and so Edmund makes fun of her. Susan says, "You're crazy," and Peter says, "Oh, you're joking with us," but then recognizing that she's not, she being truthful and not wanting to lie or to change her story because she knows what she experienced. She keeps to it, and then so there's this division that begins between specifically Lucy and the other three, and then a bigger void sort of between Edmund and Lucy. So goes on a little while, and they don't really talk about the Narnia thing, and then eventually Lucy gets back to Narnia and is able to visit Tumnus again and find out that he's still doing fine, even though he was in danger of getting in trouble with the White Witch. She's able to talk to him, and he's doing okay. But Edmund finds Lucy as she's entering into the wardrobe and follows her in, and so he's allowed into the land of Narnia. And instead of finding Lucy, which when you enter the wardrobe, you don't know how long you're going to be in there before you leave, and so he enters in but doesn't find Lucy, and so he actually encounters the White Witch, and she gives him food, which is enchanted, and gets him addicted, more or less, to this food. Turkish delight, but it's something that she creates. And so, like, now the only thing he cares about is getting more Turkish delight. And it says he eats several pounds of it, so that's kind of a recognition that there's this evil, as well as the book speaks to, if someone was able, they would eat to the point where they caused themselves harm or killed themselves, actually, from eating this food. So very much an allusion to temptation to sin, seeking pleasure to the point of our own destruction. So Edmund, taken by the witch, is then asked to bring, because the witch is obviously aware of this fear of this two sons of Adam and these two daughters of Eve, and wants the other three children. So charges Edmund with finding the other three children and bringing them to the castle. So on Edmund's way back to the lamppost and Lucy's way back from Tumnus's house, also Edmund reveals that Lucy had met Tumnus, or a fawn, and so Edmund tells more or less on Tumnus, which comes into effect when they all encounter his house later. But Lucy's super happy that Edmund has experienced Narnia, and so she wants to bring it back to the other two with proof now that she isn't making it up. She's not just being silly. There's a reality here. And so when they go back through the wardrobe. Edmund and Lucy go to meet Susan and Peter, and then they just find that or Edmund decides to lie and say that, oh yeah, they were just joking. So Lucy is very hurt, and Edmund sort of is lording it over her. And Peter calls Edmund to task, and so then there's this bigger void between Peter and Edmund, as well as Susan and Edmund as well. And they're so concerned for Lucy, Peter and Susan specifically, they take it to the old professor. And the old professor gives us that great witness that C.S. Lewis uses for his proof that Jesus is who he says he is, the liar, the lunatic, or the Lord. And so he uses that same logic that C.S. Lewis uses, the old professor uses the logic, saying that, well, okay, is Lucy a truthful person? Yes, okay. It's not likely that she's a lunatic, because that would be able to be seen in other ways, and this is the first thing that has ever sort of expressed itself that they didn't believe. And so if she's telling the truth, and the professor is great in the sense that he takes them at their word. He does not belittle them. He does not treat them as children, but meets them as equals and shows them care and concern, and listens to their story, as well as accepts the reality that things aren't of this world, or that we can't see or experience in a normal way. That doesn't mean they don't exist, right? So recognizing sort of that divine reality. But so he uses the logic of, well, if she's truthful and she's not a lunatic, then and she's not a liar, then she must be truthful, right? So those are the three options. And so the liar, the lunatic, and the Lord is Jesus. Jesus either is a liar, a lunatic, or he is who he says he is. So Lucy, sort of through the professor's affirmation, not that Lucy sees that, but through Peter and Susan, so they sort of question themselves the way they perceive things or thought they perceived things, giving sort of that recognition that there may be something else deeper going on. But they're still concerned for her, and they're like, what should we do? And the professor says, let's just everybody mind their own business and let the Lord take care of it, right? He doesn't say that, but sort of the recognition that we can't do anything specifically, but through the story, it sort of takes care of itself as far as they encounter the world of Narnia. So as it happens, Mrs. McCready is giving tours, and they're trying to get away, and all four of them are sort of pushed into this room with the wardrobe, and they all enter into the wardrobe with the intention to hide from the tour group. And entering into the wardrobe, they recognize or keep pushing in, as there's four of them, and the wardrobe is pretty big, but they push back and they find that there's no back, and they're in the world of Narnia. And again, they encounter that lamppost, and so Lucy's overjoyed in recognizing that they're in the world of Narnia and wants to take them to Tumnus's house. Tumnus, they go to his house but find that it's been ransacked, and that the witch has left a note saying that this is a traitor, and so he is captured. Tumnus is captured. So their goal is to find Tumnus. But being them children, they don't really know what to do. But Peter sort of takes the role of leader and says, no, we need to do something. We don't know what to do, but we'll figure it out. And so they're actually led to someone who does know what to do by a bird. They're talking, and the bird sort of leads them, and they sort of recognize that the bird understands and is leading them. They follow the bird to Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. And this is where the story sort of opens up, because the Beavers let the four know of the world of Narnia and lets them know of Aslan. When they hear the name of Aslan, Lucy, Susan, and Peter have like this peaceful feeling, where Edmund has this uncomfortable feeling, sort of a recognition of the power of the name of Aslan, or the name of Jesus. And so in this encounter, they have dinner, and Edmund is trying to justify himself in his own mind that the White Witch isn't the White Witch, she's the queen, and he's going to, really he just wants more Turkish delight, that's sort of being the driving factor. And so as opposed to, recognizing the other three aren't on board, especially after they've seen Tumnus's house, and hearing Mr. and Mrs. Beaver speak of the White Witch's past and how she's making it Christmas, or always winter but never Christmas, as well as Aslan being on the move, fighting against this White Witch. Edmund decides to go to the White Witch as the other three enjoy their dinner. And so Edmund leaves without a coat, goes to the White Witch, and she sort of rebukes him for not doing as she asked, bringing the other three to her. But he reveals to her that they're at the beaver's house, and that maybe they can, get them. Well, she orders her guard, which is a wolf, Morgrim, the wolf, to go and kill whoever they find there. So as the White Witch becomes more and more revealed, Edmund starts to recognize sort of the error of his ways, seeing that there's this real evil here. The other three recognize that Edmund's gone, and Mr. and Mrs. Beaver expressed that, well, they knew that Edmund was sort of under the control of the White Witch and had like a look in his eye, and so they're like, oh well, once he's gone, they're gonna reveal that they're there, and so they need to make their way to the stone table, which is where Aslan is. And so the camps have been set, Edmund with the White Witch, and the three with the beavers, and they're both going their own ways. So the three go with the beavers, and they encounter, so as Aslan is on the move, the power of the witch is starting to break, and so Christmas actually happens. The winter is breaking, and they encounter Santa on the way to the stone table, and they're given gifts of food, and the beavers receive sewing machine and mending of the dam, and Peter receives a sword and a shield. Lucy receives a healing vial and a dagger, and Susan receives a bow. The women aren't, or Susan and Lucy aren't expected to go into battle, but for their protection. And then I guess it sort of struck me that Edmund doesn't receive anything, sort of recognizing that he's not doing as he should. He's in a place where he's not being a good brother or even a good person, so he doesn't receive anything. Not that he's there to receive them, but that reality obviously is expressed in preparation for Christmas. So they continue on and they meet Aslan, and so when they first heard of Aslan, they're like, they find out, well, he's the king of the beasts and the king of the animal people of Narnia, and so because he's the king of animals, the king of the animals, of course, is the lion. So they recognize that he's a lion, and Susan says, the line that sticks out to me, is it safe? And the beavers say, no, it isn't safe. He's not safe, but he's good. And that reality, following our King Jesus, isn't safe, but it's good. And we may suffer in serving our Lord, but he's good, and he has the best intentions for us and for everyone. So Aslan, again, is sort of an allusion to Jesus. So they meet, or when they get to the stone table, which is where the Aslan is, as well as all his subjects, all these other animals that can talk, they see Aslan and they're struck with both fear and awe. And so I think it's also important too, where they say it's good and terrible, right? So like the recognition that when we encounter God, it is a scary thing, not because we fear for ourselves, but in his power, in his majesty, in his beauty, there is a terribleness. We generally think of terrible as something that's bad, but terrible in a good way. Overwhelming eyes is what they say. But they sort of fight, like, oh, you go do it. No, you speak to him. And Peter is sort of pushed as the firstborn to go up to Aslan first. And the first thing Aslan says is, "Welcome." And then he says, "Where is the fourth?" And Edmund, of course, with the White Witch, Peter sort of admits, he's compelled to say, "I may have had something to do with it," which is very sort of relatable. When we encounter something of goodness, we're compelled to recognize our own faults, and the beauty of the sacrament of reconciliation and drawing out, bringing those faults into the light so the Lord can encounter them. And Aslan doesn't say anything to condemn nor to absolve, just recognizing that we're going to do everything we can, because Susan says, being practical, says, "Isn't there anything we can do?" And Aslan says, "Everything, all shall be done, but it may be harder than you think." So in this time, the White Witch is they sent their wolves to try and find the beavers and the children. And so as they're meeting with Aslan, the wolf encounters them and is attacking Susan. And so Peter saves Susan with his sword and goes into combat for the first time, sort of like a coming of age for Peter, recognizing he's to be in the battle with leading the Narnians in this battle against the White Witch and her people, her minotaurs and the ghouls and witches and things like that. And so he vanquishes the wolf, and there's this interplay afterwards with Aslan and Peter, which there's so many things in the story that sort of stick out, like the not closing the door behind you when you go into the wardrobe, or always wipe your blade is what he tells Peter. It's like an adult sharing those words of wisdom. C.S. Lewis maybe sharing with his goddaughter, with us, as we encounter these words of wisdom, which sort of are funny and interesting. So after they after Peter vanquishes the wolf, they go to rescue Edmund, who has followed the White Witch, or been brought with the White Witch. And the White Witch, after winter breaking and showing herself more evil, turning some woodland critters, some Narnians, into stone because they were enjoying gifts from Santa, who they said it was from Santa. She got angry and said, "If you say that he didn't come, I'll grant you mercy." And one of the children, being honest, says, he has. And so they turn, the White Witch turns this Narnian party into stone. And Edmund, sort of recognizing, feeling sorry for the first time for someone other than himself, recognizing sort of the bad camp he's in. But the White Witch, recognizing sort of the loss of her power, sort of looks to figure out what to do. So they have to abandon their sled, since it's no longer snowing, it's turned to spring very quickly. She's deciding what to do with Edmund. And so she decides that they're going to take Edmund's life, because if there's only 3, then the 4 children of Adam and Eve can't fulfill the prophecy and can't take away this queenship, or control from her to Narnia. Because they say, well, but Aslan's here, what does it matter? I'm not saying the word Aslan. She actually reprimands her dwarf slave and says, "Don't use his name." Again, that sort of recognition there's power in his name. And so she decides she's going to kill Edmund, and so the need to rescue is very pressing when Peter comes with the other entourage of good Narnians, and so the witch and the dwarf hide themselves. They become look like something they're not. And it's one of the witch's powers to make things look like they're not. It's also very interesting. So they rescue Edmund and bring Edmund back to Aslan, and he has time with Aslan, sort of to rectify and seek reconciliation. We see sort of that reality where the other three children then encounter Edmund, and Edmund is sorry for his faults, but it's only after he's spoken to Aslan and Aslan has corrected that fault. This piece of the story, I think, is most interesting. The Aslan encountering Edmund, but then also as the witch sort of makes her claim on Edmund. So though they rescued Edmund from the physical clutches of the witch sends the dwarf to speak with to Aslan and says that I have a claim on Edmund. He's a traitor, and so all traitors must be dealt with. And it was her domain to deal with traitors. And this recognition that the world, sin requires a cost. Traitors in this story require a kill, is what she says, which is very stark. And so she encounters Aslan sort of calling him to task, saying this, Edmund more or less deserves to die. And there's no way for the children, Edmund, to deal with it. And so Aslan says, let me talk to the witch and we'll figure this out. And so the witch and Aslan speak to each other, and Aslan comes to a conclusion with the witch, but doesn't reveal to them what the conclusion is. So then the witch leaves, and they recognize they're going to war, and so Aslan meets with Peter, and this resolution has been struck, but it's sort of behind the scenes almost. But they need to get up and move and go elsewhere and camp. So the camp is moved. Peter is speaking to Aslan as he is to be the captain, the leader of this army, because the witch is summoning her group of evil people to fight against the Narnians. So after all the camp has been moved, Peter and Edmund go to sleep, and the girls try to go to sleep as well, Lucy and Susan, but they can't sleep. They have this fear that something bad is going to happen. Aslan looks sad, and they are just concerned. And so after trying to go to sleep for a while, they decide to see what's going on. And they find Aslan out about and sort of suffering silently, not unlike Jesus in his agony in the garden. And so Aslan just wants to be with Susan and Lucy, and so they spend some time together, and they travel with Aslan. And in his travel towards back the way they came, back towards the stone table, he asks Lucy and Susan to put their hands on his mane because they want to feel him. He wants them to feel their presence. And so they don't know what's going on, but they follow Aslan, and Aslan again is going to give the White Witch what she desires. The the kill for the traitor. And so he says to the girls, hide, and they hide in the trees and the bushes, and he goes to the stone table to give himself over to the White Witch and to save Edmund from the cost of his being a traitor. And this scene is, very much like Jesus's passion. He's Aslan is trimmed of his fur, he's mocked, he's bound, and then finally killed. Um, the whole scene is very relatable to the passion again, and Jesus, going quietly, letting himself being led to his death. Uh, it's just hard to accept sort of that reality. Understanding, you know, how this could happen as a child. I guess I didn't probably understand it as a child, but definitely the scene became more and more meaningful as I grew in maturity, as I reread the book and saw sort of the similarities of that passion. So they kill Aslan, the witch and her company kill Aslan, and then they go out and start war with the Narnians and Peter and Edmund, and that takes place as we follow the girls in the book, and the girls try and unbind Aslan after they all leave, all the witches' company leave, and mice actually come and undo the cords, which has a neat kind of repercussion in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, or Prince Caspian. We get to meet Reepicheep, which we'll talk about later. But there's just a lot of sorrow, and the girls are very sad, and they don't know what to do, and there's a lot of just sadness. Of course, as morning rises, the stone table breaks, and Aslan is raised from the dead. This deeper magic. If someone gives their life for somebody else that has no fault, they will be resurrected. What Jesus did for us, giving himself over for us so as to give us new life. And so after that, Aslan has this great sort of reunion with Lucy and Susan, and then they go to bring all those who have been turned to stone back, and Aslan breathes on all the stone animals and people, and this one breath brings them back. I am the breath of life. I am the so just very very much Jesus esque as breathing life into these stoned creatures due to the witch's evil magic. And so we can see that element as well. After all the animals are freed from they go to Care Paravel and free all those animals, and then they go to join the war with Peter and Edmund. And so the war is more or less over, or close to being over. Aslan takes the White Witch, and they fight, and Aslan defeats her. But then after the fact, Peter gives us the synopsis of the battle. Edmund being sort of very courageous in his fight when he takes on the White Witch. He breaks the wand, which was causing all the Narnians to be turned to stone, and so crippling sort of her attack. But he took a grave wound from that. And so Lucy goes around and heals Edmund first,
And Aslan says there's others to be healed, and she just wants to spend time with her brother. But Aslan calls her to that courage to go on and save others. So there's a great sort of charity, mercy, as well as uh, fear and courage and talking the battle. But then just in our interactions, where we're called to be at any time, the girls with Aslan were doing as they should, and then when they came to the battle after the fact, they did and were able to do great good in that. And we see Lucy sort of shining with her gift from Santa, with her vial of healing liquid. So then after that, they gather up and then they go to Cair Paravel, and Peter and Edmund are crowned king, and Lucy and Susan are crowned queen. And the great scene, once a king in Narnia, or once a king or queen in Narnia, always a king and queen in Narnia. And this speaks to the dignity of the human person, the reality that we are made kings and queens in heaven. We share in the divine life. So yeah, just the dignity of the human person and the reality that we see in them being made kings and queens. They go on to live a long life in Narnia as kings and queens, and they don't really go too into that too much, but then they change over the course of the years, and we get to see sort of a little bit of that later in the different stories. But they grow into their identity. I guess I just want to talk about Edmund a little bit, being that he sort of had the transforming, like he becomes a prodigal son in a lot of ways, coming back after falling, uh, and then turning around, changing his life, and his whole disposition changes. You can see sort of his interactions, even as an adult, as a king, later in years, sort of him having more somber attitude, recognizing sort of the change that happened within him, being put back, set straight from sort of the damage done due to different circumstances in his life. But they are traveling back all around. They're trying to find the white stag, which is a great um, a great beast that if you catch it, it gives you wishes apparently. And so in their travels, they can't find it. But then they encounter this lamppost again, and it's many years later, so they barely remember it. But there's this recognition. Something is, this is an important thing. And when they hit this lamppost, there's a sort of questioning. What should we do? Should we move on? Should we go back? And they decide through Peter's prompting that they move on. They continue to pursue the white stag, and then next thing they know, they're tumbling out of the wardrobe, and it's the same time when they went into the wardrobe. And the neat thing is, they were going to just leave it at that, as sort of leaving it with their what they encountered in Narnia and keep it to themselves a little bit. But then they recognized they took the four coats and left them in Narnia, and so they wanted to tell the old professor in honesty's sake. And again, the professor comes off as a friend and a mentor, and believes them. And we get to learn a little bit more of that in the magician's nephew, and so we'll look at that next time. But I'm excited to hear what you think of the Chronicles of Narnia in general, but of course focusing mostly on the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Share those moments that sort of stuck out to you, those just cool moments, but then also the moments that sort of shine through as how the Lord is showing Himself in this beautiful story. And again, this is open to children and adults, and feel free. And I look forward to talking with you all on Friday. God bless you, and thank you for watching. I hope this will be an enjoyable experience, and I look forward to Friday to be with you all. God bless you.